Throughout human history, one of the most common responses to the question of God's existence is doubt. Skeptics and atheists have raised objections that seem compelling at first glance. If God exists, why is there evil in the world? Who created God? Isn't science enough to explain everything? These objections have troubled many sincere seekers, yet when examined carefully, they reveal not weaknesses in the existence of God, but misunderstandings of reality, logic, and human perspective. The first and perhaps most frequent objection is the problem of evil. If God is all-powerful and all-good, why do innocent people suffer? Why do natural disasters, diseases, and atrocities occur? At first, this appears to be an absolute challenge, but a deeper look shows that the existence of evil is not evidence against God. It is evidence of free will, moral growth, and the limits of human perception. Consider this. If humans were programmed like robots to always do good, would their choices truly be meaningful? The existence of evil allows moral agency. Without the possibility of wrong, virtue has no value. Without suffering, compassion, courage, and love lose significance. Furthermore, much of what we call evil or suffering is temporary and relative. Our perspective is limited to the immediate moment and the narrow span of our lifetimes. Imagine standing beside a painter, seeing only a few strokes of their brush, and complaining that the painting is flawed. Only when stepping back can the full picture be seen. Similarly, what appears as chaos or injustice in the world may be part of a larger order beyond human comprehension. Philosophers and theologians across centuries have argued that the presence of suffering does not negate God's existence. Rather, it points to a universe that balances freedom, consequence, and growth, something a purely material universe could not sustain. The second objection is the question, who created God? This seems reasonable superficially, yet it misunderstands the concept of a necessary being. Everything that begins to exist must have a cause. But God, by definition, did not begin to exist. God is not contingent. God is necessary. Contingent things depend on something else for existence, but a necessary being exists by its own nature. To ask, who created God, is to apply the rules of the finite, contingent world to an infinite, timeless reality. It is like asking, who made infinity? The answer is that infinity is not made. It simply is. To deny God's existence because of this question is to misunderstand the very nature of causality and existence. Another common objection arises from science. Doesn't science explain the universe without God? Certainly, science explains how things happen. The laws of physics, chemistry, biology, and evolution describe processes with incredible precision. But explanation is not the same as origin or meaning. Science can explain how, but not why. The Big Bang explains the expansion of the universe, but not why there is a universe at all. Evolution explains the development of life, but not why life exists or why consciousness and morality emerged. Even the laws of nature themselves, orderly, precise, and constant, require an explanation. Science alone cannot account for the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning of physical constants, the emergence of consciousness, or the existence of objective morality. These point to a source beyond nature, a mind beyond matter, a God. Skeptics also raise the objection that belief in God is merely a psychological crutch, an invention to cope with fear and uncertainty. Yet this claim is inconsistent with evidence. People across all cultures, times, and societies have conceived of God, despite different circumstances and hardships. Human imagination and need may shape the understanding of God, but they cannot explain the universal, persistent, and transcendent experience of divinity reported across history. If God were merely a psychological crutch, why do the same attributes, the same longing, and the same ethical frameworks appear in civilizations that had no contact with each other? The universality of God experience points to a reality beyond mere human invention. Some challenge the existence of God by pointing to natural disasters, wars, or injustices as proof that God, if he exists, must be indifferent. But here again, we confront the limits of human perception. In a universe governed by cause and effect, natural laws, and human agency, apparent suffering often results from processes that are neutral, not malevolent. Gravity does not act out of cruelty. Earthquakes are not moral judgments. What humans perceive as injustice is often the natural consequence of independent laws. Recognizing this does not weaken God's existence. It highlights that God's governance operates on a level beyond our immediate understanding. Another layer of objection comes from the assertion that multiple religions and belief systems exist. Therefore, God cannot be real. Yet the diversity of human thought does not disprove God. It proves human free will and perspective. Different societies interpret the divine differently, but the presence of belief itself is evidence that humans are drawn to something beyond themselves. The question is not whether humans interpret God correctly in every detail, but whether a transcendent reality exists that all humans seek, consciously or unconsciously. Finally, some claim that God is unnecessary because natural explanations suffice. But natural explanations themselves require order, logic, and laws. The existence of universal constants, the emergence of life, and the presence of consciousness cannot be random accidents. To posit a purely material universe as self-sufficient is to ignore the very principles of causality, contingency, and necessity that science relies upon to function. A universe that obeys consistent laws must have a lawgiver. A universe that produces life must have a source. Denying God while acknowledging natural law is a contradiction. In examining these objections, a clear pattern emerges. The criticisms often stem from misunderstandings, limited perspective, or a category error. Applying human limitations to an infinite, necessary, and transcendent reality. Far from disproving God, these objections illuminate the depth, complexity, and necessity of his existence. Evil does not negate God. It highlights free will. The question of creation cannot apply to a timeless being. Science cannot explain ultimate origin or meaning. Human psychology cannot fully invent the universal, persistent, and ethical recognition of divinity. To truly confront these objections is to recognize that God is not a hypothesis among others, but the ultimate answer that reason, experience, and reality converge upon. To deny God is not merely to disagree, it is to reject the logic of existence, the order of the universe, and the very structure of reality itself. The human mind may wrestle with questions, doubts, and challenges, but these objections do not topple the necessity of God. They sharpen our understanding of him. Every argument, every skepticism, every apparent problem invites deeper reflection, and when examined honestly, each points again to the same conclusion. God exists, not as a vague idea, but as the absolute foundation of everything that is, was, and ever will be. Humanity's objections are not the end of the search. They are the doorway to clarity. By examining doubt with honesty, reason, and logic, we find that the existence of God is not a question of faith alone. It is the most rational conclusion available to the human mind.